1944, mainland Europe was under Hitler's control. But the tide of war was beginning to turn. The Germans had been defeated at Stalingrad, and the Eastern Front had collapsed as the Russians forced them back. In the west, the combined might of the Allied forces was massing in southern England, preparing to mount an invasion. U.S. Army General Dwight Eisenhower was appointed Supreme Commander of the Allied forces. He masterminded the operation, a plan so complex it took 18 months to prepare.
For the Allied planners, D-Day was essentially a one-shot gamble. As Eisenhower said, that we could settle for nothing less than victory. It was the only option that they could consider, and if it had been a failure, then the war could easily have been lost.
The build-up in England was so immense that if we got a toehold on the continent and could begin pouring in these men and supplies, we were going to win the war. But it was a touch-and-go thing. Hitler might very well have thrown the Allies back into the sea, and at Omaha Beach especially, he came that close to it.
American troops began to arrive in England as early as 1942, many of them under 20 years of age and who had never experienced the horrors of war. It was these soldiers who were picked to lead the assault on June the 6th.
My name is Richard Atkins. I was in Company D, 116th Infantry.
John Robert Slaughter, call me Bob. I was in D Company, 116th Infantry Regiment of the 29th Division.
Bob Slaughter left school at 16 to join the Army. Within 2 years, he was a sergeant in charge of a squad of 9 men.
David Silva, Company D, 1st Battalion.
David Silva put his career as a priest on hold to join the National Guard at the age of 18.
My name is Marvin Mapes. I was in the National Guard outfit of the 29th Division.
Marvin Mapes was a semi-professional baseball player from Virginia when he joined the 29th Division.
My name is Ernest Boegel, B-O-E-G-E-L.
Californian Ernest Boegel was a shop assistant before the war. By D-Day, he was a second lieutenant. These soldiers were typical of the 116th Regiment of the 29th Division. Many of them had come from the same towns. Some had even been at school together. They knew little about the war in Europe, and for the majority, this was the first time they had left the United States.
These were citizen soldiers. These were all kids that had never been in combat before. These were kids that were told by their briefers, look, about half of you are going to be dead before tomorrow's over. One guy from the 116th told me he heard that, and he said, I looked to my right, and I looked to my left, and I thought, you poor bastard.
This was all new to us. And I had no fear whatsoever at that time.
I wasn't too scared. There was some guys scared.
They were kids. They were 17. I know one, Bob Slaughter, was 17 years old. They were 18. They were 19 years old. Of course they were going to live forever. The Germans weren't going to get them. They were too young, too good looking. Their mother loved them too much for them to get killed. And they went into action with that attitude. And Dwight Eisenhower had deliberately picked the 29th Division as one of the lead divisions on D-Day for exactly that reason. He didn't want veterans. A veteran infantryman is a terrified infantryman. He knows what hot shrapnel can do to a body. He knows what a bullet can do to a body. You want kids. You want 17, 18, and 19-year-olds who are out to conquer the world. They can do anything, kind of attitude. And that was the 116th Regiment and the 29th Division on D-Day.
The British naval officers who landed the 29th Division onto Omaha Beach were surprised by the soldiers' lack of combat experience.
The 116th Regiment were rather like farm boys, almost as if they came from Somerset. And they were rather like one of our territorial army regiments. Very pleasant, amiable, easygoing bunch. We expected battle-hardened soldiers, but these guys hadn't seen battle before.
Many soldiers in the 116th Regiment had spent nearly 2 years training in Britain, preparing for the invasion. As D-Day grew closer, more and more troops arrived in the country. By June 1944, there were nearly 2 million North American troops living and training alongside British forces.
You've always gone through the training, but you don't know what's going to really happen. There was a lot of fear. I think everyone had it a little bit.
We knew that we couldn't go home until we captured Berlin, and so our mission was very clear that we were to go in and live and subdue the Germans.
They had trained intensively for the 6 months preceding June the 6th. They were highly motivated. They were ready to go in every single way, but they weren't really prepared for the horrors of A, combat, and B, the kind of combat that they saw in Omaha, which was horrific beyond belief.
We thought, well, we'll go in and just drive them back and take over. But that beach was fortified.
No amount of training can get you ready. You learn on-the-job training, and I'll tell you, it's a tough way to learn.